Alright, what's happening, y'all, man? Bad news, but this was kinda expected. What's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, coming with a quick Rico report. Just wanted to announce that it is highly unlikely that the Washington football team and Brandon Scherff agree upon a long-term deal. Are his days in DC numbered? What are our options? Tag him again? Trade him, or just let him walk and find a replacement in the draft, maybe free agency? We're gonna explore all of those options in this video. You already know how Street Scores do, but before we get to that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get a notification every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. And as always, man, make sure y'all check out the rest of the channel. All of my videos are organized in playlists, so you can go down and just watch so many videos, have so much fun. And I even have a comedy playlist for all of my funny videos, so make sure you check that out as well. And again, man, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell next to the subscription button. That's really important. Let's get it. Alright, so Ian Rappaport came out a few hours ago and said the Washington football team and all Pro Guard Brandon Scherff are not expected to reach a long-term deal by Thursday's deadline, sources say. One of the Washington football team's most respected players, Scherff will play on the $18 million franchise tag, his second in a row, and didn't hit free agency. And it's crazy because he's done great things since he's been here. Remember, we drafted him in 2015 out of Iowa, round 1, pick 5. I remember that day wanting Leonard Williams more. Leonard Williams fell to us. We took Brandon Scherff. I think ultimately it worked out very well for us. I mean, Brandon Scherff's playing for us longer than Leonard Williams played for the Jets. You can definitely say that Brandon Scherff has been a better guard than Leonard Williams has been a defensive tackle. And with us not taking Leonard Williams, that's been a domino effect of us taking Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, maybe even like Chase Young and Montez Sweat. But either way, Brandon Scherff, 4-time Pro Bowler 2016, 17, 19, and 20 as in last year. And also first team All-Pro last year in 2020. Arguably, honestly, not one of his best seasons, but it's somewhat of a popularity contest. And even though he missed a couple of games, he was first team All-Pro. Awarded the best guard in the NFL, and I'm pretty sure that's led to a lot of the problems we're having right now with re-signing him, trying to get him to sign a long-term contract, because he's like, I made first team All-Pro, which means I'm the best guard in the NFL, so I deserve the best guard in the NFL money more than that, actually. And I think that's the root of a lot of our problems. So whoever votes this All-Pro thing, Washington Nation got beef with you. But this is a really interesting situation because, I mean, where do we go from here? Do we trade him? Do we, tag him again? That's a horrible idea. Do we just let him walk for free, get nothing back? Definitely about to explore some of those options. Starting with the tag. You already know how tags work. You have to make a certain amount of money every time you franchise tag a player. He was making $12.525 million on his 5th year option 2 years ago. Then we franchise tagged him for the first time last season. He was making $15.03 million on his franchise tag. And then we franchise tagged him again going into this season, the 2021 season, and he's going to make $18.036 million fully guaranteed again this season. And to add it up, Scherff will have made a total of $45.591 million from 2019 through 2021. That is crazy. That is ridiculous money. Almost quarterback money. And so it seems like franchise tagging him for a 3rd time in a row is pretty much out of the question. I mean, it just never happens. The only person that's ever been franchise tagged 3 times ever in NFL history was Walter Jones in Seattle. He was tagged 3 times in a row. Again, that's only happened once in NFL history. Doubt it's going to happen here, mostly because of the money that's going to cost. Every time you franchise tag a player, they have to make more and more money. They have to make more money than the last time you franchise tagged them. So he would be making 144% for whatever he's making this year, which means he would make approximately $26 million in one season if we were to franchise tag him next year. That's literally out of the question. I'm willing to bet my life savings that we do not tag him again. That's the last option. We would let him walk before we pay him $26 million in 1 year as a guard, especially a guard, that doesn't play very often. Now, We have blown his injuries out of proportion. Well, a lot of people have, making it seem like he's just the most injury prone guy walking, because he hasn't played a full 16 game season since 2016, and he's missed 19 games since that season out of 65 potential games that he could have played in, including the playoff game against the Buccaneers. That's the 65th one, and that's not terrible. It's not great. It's not somebody you want to hand $26 million for 1 year to, but that's also not perfect. I mean, you have Charles Leno, who we just signed this year as a tackle, hasn't missed a game in years, not one. So it's not like, staying fully healthy and depending on a player to play 16 games a season is impossible. Brandon Scherff is just not one of those guys. So since the tag is out of the question, what about trading him? Could we potentially trade him to one of those contenders that just the last thing they need is an all-pro caliber guard? That's the last thing. You know how we get close to that trade deadline in October, and for the past couple of years, it's been like, this is the best time to trade Ryan Kerrigan. Instead of just letting them walk for free like we just did this year, his trade value is at its highest near the trade deadline. There's a team out there that just needs an edge rusher. They feel like they're an edge rusher away from winning the Super Bowl. Ryan Kerrigan was the perfect solution for that. We never made that move, but we could do it with Brandon Scherff, who's definitely more so in his prime than Ryan Kerrigan was these past couple of years. So you can make an argument that Brandon Scherff will be more tradable this trade deadline just off of where he is in his prime and how good he is. But at the same time, you're trading for a guy that's franchise tagged. You're not going to tag him again because of the money we just talked about, and you're going to have to pay him long term. Trading for a player that you're only getting him on a 1 year rental and you're going to have to pay him long term definitely decreases his trade value from our standpoint. Teams are going to be willing to give up way less for a player whose contract is set up like that. But at the same time, if you're trading them to a contender, the contender is pretty much putting all of their eggs in one basket to win right now. This is their year. They feel like this is their year to potentially win a Super Bowl or to at least make a deep playoff run. And maybe they'll feel like, we'll deal with the Brandon Scherff situation later. Let's trade for him now. Let's go win games, compete for a Super Bowl, and let's see what happens after that. And you have some pretty great teams with some pretty bad offensive lines. The Seahawks are a candidate. Maybe we trade Brandon Scherff to the Seahawks for some picks. I'm pretty sure if we were to make any trades, it would be for some high draft picks, like first rounds, maybe some second rounds, whatever. Not exactly sure what Brandon Scherff's trade market is right now, but I could definitely tell you and guarantee you that towards that trade deadline, that's when it will be at its highest. So depending on how the Seahawks season is looking, where if they look at it and then like, man, we just get Russell Wilson an all-pro guard. We already have the receivers. We have the running game. We can make a deep playoff run. We're just a Brandon Scherff away. They may make that trade. The Dolphins were better last year than anybody expected, really, maybe except for Dolphins fans that already knew. They let us get Eric Flowers in a trade, so now their offensive line, according to Pro Football Focus, is ranked 30th in the NFL. And if Tua's out there balling out, if Devontae Parker is able to stay healthy and Will Fuller and all of these guys, they may be able to make a real run. I mean, granted, last year, Tua Tagovailoa had a pretty ugly season. Not ugly enough to say to give up on them and reset and draft a quarterback again, but it was ugly. And they still managed to win 10 games with Ryan Fitzpatrick, who a lot of people feel like is not a good quarterback anyway. So if it wasn't Ryan Fitzpatrick, if it wasn't Tua Tagovailoa, it had to be the roster around them. And the offensive line is clearly one of their biggest weaknesses, even when they had Eric Flowers. So they may want to pick up a Brandon Scherff and see what they could do to build around Tua Tagovailoa for the future and maybe even win now. Same thing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They let David DeCastro go. They're only returning with 2 starters from the offensive line last year, and I just don't see the Pittsburgh Steelers going into a rebuild. They drafted Najee Harris. They want to win right now with that running game. Ben Roethlisberger came back for another year. I'm surprised because it seems like he's been contemplating retirement for like 3 to 4 years. But, he wasn't as bad as a lot of people said he was last year, so we'll see. But again, I don't see the Pittsburgh Steelers going into rebuild mode, so maybe depending on how they look towards that trade deadline record-wise, they may be like, man, if we can get just a Brandon Scherff, we might be able to run the table. Chicago Bears, if Justin Fields is balling out. We just took Charles Leno from him. this year in free agency. We took Cornelius Lucas from them last year in free agency. Their offensive line is only going downhill. Granted, they drafted a couple of guys that should be really good, but who knows if they're not playing to a certain level that they expect. And if Justin Fields is ahead of schedule and is balling out like I think he should at some point in the NFL level, if he's ready to do that, his rookie season takes over and they're out here looking like a strong playoff contender, they may want to trade for a Brandon Scherff. The Minnesota Vikings, Anthony Barr, I believe it was like a few days ago, said that he truly honestly believes they have a Super Bowl roster, but their offensive line is probably the biggest weakness on the team. They may just be a Brandon Scherff away from making some noise. The Las Vegas Raiders, that team is emerging. I mean, they got a win against the Chiefs last year. Another team, probably one of their biggest weaknesses is their offensive line. Drafted a couple of guys that should be good, like an Alex Leatherwood, but we'll see. Cincinnati Bengals just, I mean, they may not be a contender, but they may be desperate to just bring in anybody to help protect their franchise guy in Joe Burrow. Remember, they drafted Jamar Chase instead of going with all of those offensive tackles and guards that were available in the draft. So they may be desperate for a Brandon Scherff. And I would want their pick the most out of everybody who I've named so far, because their pick is probably going to be highest in the draft. You have the Atlanta Falcons. Offensive line is arguably one of their biggest weaknesses as well. It's defense and offensive line. You're going to protect your asset in Matt Ryan. The Jacksonville Jaguars offensive line isn't the greatest either. Do you want to protect Trevor Lawrence? Denver Broncos, if they trade for Aaron Rodgers and have enough assets left, they may trade for Brandon Scherff to protect their superior asset. And the list goes on and on. I mean, you can really make an argument for most teams in the NFL why they may want to trade for Brandon Scherff, but those were some of the really notable ones whose offensive lines are just ugly. And they may literally just be a Brandon Scherff from making some real noise in the playoffs and potentially being a Super Bowl contender. But if we don't trade away Brandon Scherff, well, even if we do, if we trade away Brandon Scherff, get some picks, or if we just let him walk, either way, if Brandon Scherff is not here in 2022, which I highly doubt he will be, I highly doubt he's going to be a burgundy and gold player moving forward in his career. There's also some free agents available. Now, granted, Quentin Nelson for the Indianapolis Colts, Wyatt Teller for the Cleveland Browns. I highly doubt they don't get re-signed long-term by their teams, but if they don't, we may want to take a look at them. You also still have Larry Warford and David DeCastro. David DeCastro seems like he may be pondering retirement, and he also has this weird injury that he was struggling with the last year. But you never know, man. Larry Warford, David DeCastro out there, especially Larry Warford, who was a 3-time back-to-back Pro Bowler for the New Orleans Saints, opted out of last season because of COVID, and just is not on the team right now. I'm still confused as to why he's not on the team. He is a Pro Bowl guard, not old. He's 30 years old, exactly. He's not old for an offensive lineman at all. I'm not understanding why he's not on the team right now. And then you also have the draft, and this draft is pretty deep with interior offensive linemen, I'm not gonna lie. You have Kenyon Green from Texas A&M. You have Jamari Salyer from Georgia, Emil Ekiyor Jr. from Alabama, Zion Johnson from Boston College, Marquise Hayes from Oklahoma, Ikem Ekonwu from North Carolina State, Ben Brown from Ole Miss, Ed Ingram from LSU. LSU got 2 of them, Ed Ingram and Chasen Hines, Lakeita Smith from Virginia Tech, Cade Mays, the traitor from Georgia, but now he's on Tennessee, Doug Nestor from West Virginia, Cole Schneider from UCF, Jalen Thomas from SMU, Tyrese Robinson from Oklahoma, Kane Madden from Marshall. I mean, it's going to be a Harry Miller from Ohio State. This is going to be a pretty deep interior offensive lineman draft. We may be able to find a Brandon Scherff replacement in the 2nd or 3rd round. We wouldn't expect them to immediately be Brandon Scherff, and we wouldn't really expect them to ever be a Brandon Scherff. But if they could just be 90% of what Brandon Scherff was, and we can take that $26 million that we would pay him and put it towards something else on the team, overall we will be better drafting out offensive linemen and adding that player, that top player in free agency, than just keeping Brandon Scherff. Ultimately, as far as team building goes, that equals out on a net positive. And then even just on our roster, even if we don't attack free agency or the draft aggressively for an interior offensive lineman, the future is bright with Eric Flowers, Sadiq Charles, Wes Schweitzer, and maybe Samuel Cosmi. I think we're trying them at right tackle, left tackle, ultimately as our franchise guy on the outside. So Samuel Cosmi may not be included, but I mean, Eric Flowers is a really underrated guard in the NFL. Sadiq Charles, if he's able to get healthy, remember, he was a starting left tackle and potentially the best offense in college football history. Joe Burrow never had to worry about his blind side, and he was doing it in the SEC and in the college football players. Had to do it against Clemson, had to do it against Georgia, Florida, Alabama, all of these top defensive lines in the country. So Saahdiq Charles has the talent. Can he just stay healthy? Can he develop into that true Pro Bowl caliber guard that his talent says he can? And Wes Schweitzer. Wes Schweitzer is a huge surprise. I'm very surprised by how good of a guard he actually is already. I mean, he was the backup on a bad Falcons O-line before we picked him up. Falcons O-line was already bad. He was a backup to that bad O-line. I don't know how he's that good over here. I'm just going to trust the process with John Moscow. He seems to get the most out of guys. He may not be Bill Callahan, but he may be that next tier right below him as far as getting the most out of his offensive linemen. I mean, we even saw Jerron Christian not be terrible, nowhere near as bad as what we thought. Not necessarily good, but not terrible. We saw what he did with Cornelius Lucas, one of the most underrated tackles in the league. Like I said, you already saw what he did with Wes Schweitzer. He just couldn't figure it out with Wes Martin. So I think between Eric Flowers, Saahdiq Charles, and Wes Schweitzer, we could put a left and a right guard out there that's good enough to at least be a top half of the league offensive line. Potentially even better if Saahdiq Charles can reach his full potential. So even if we can't keep Brandon Scherff long term, I don't think the future is dark. Again, I highly doubt he's on this team. We don't sign him to a long-term extension by tomorrow, as in Thursday. The deadline for signing franchise tag players to long-term deals is pretty much done. You're not going to tag him again for $26 million 1 year for a guard, because otherwise you would just offer him that yearly, and I'm pretty sure he would take it. I'm pretty sure he's just hardballing right now because he feels like, well, I could just get paid $26 million next year on a franchise tag. Why would I take less than that per year when the salary cap's only going to go up and up and up, especially after this new TV deal that's about to go crazy? Hopefully we can trade him. That's the ideal situation right now. At some point around the trade deadline, as we get closer to it, you trade him when his trade value is at its highest. Hopefully get a few draft picks, hopefully a first round pick involved in that. If it's going to be a contender and after you trade Brandon Scherff to him, they're going to win more games. So it's more than likely that first round pick will be very late in the first round anyway, but still, I'll take it. Either way, again, I don't think Brandon Scherff is going to be wearing the burgundy and gold uniform 2022 and beyond at all. Highly doubt it. But hey man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about this entire situation. Please like this video if you liked it. If you learned anything, you had to have learned something. I spit so many numbers out. You had to have learned something, so you got to leave a like before you leave. And as always, man, I appreciate all the support, man. Shouts out to everybody that donates to the channel. Big shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors whose name you see scrolling on the screen right now. And a special shouts out to my one All-Pro sponsor, Jaden. Again, I really appreciate all y'all, man. I'll catch y'all later. I'm out.